Habib, he wanted to retire on his own terms, and he did. And in this sport, you often don't get to retire on your own terms. So glad Dana accepted it. So the UFC lightweight championship is now officially vacant, and we have a title fight at UFC 262 on May 15th between Charles Oliveira.
Dustin Poirier fighting for the title.
Charles Oliveira and Michael Chandler will be fighting on it. And if you want to give me, the floor to give my thoughts overall on everything, because I have a lot on this and it's all going to make sense. So anyway,
okay.
A lot of people were like, Oliveira and Chandler doesn't make sense. Okay, you got to take it from two sides here. If you want to do the who deserves it based on the sports side, based on win streaks, you have to put Charles Oliveira in there. But when the second guy, realistically, the second guy in that scenario should either be Beneil Dariush or Islam Makhachev. So, and now when you want to take what's best for business is if you're going to make the fight for the title that's going to make you the most money, then you need to make Dustin Poirier and Conor McGregor the trilogy fight for the title. They're not going to do that, though, because they don't want to put McGregor in there off a loss and all this and that. So a lot of people were like, Dustin Poirier should be in the title fight. However, Poirier and McGregor, it's almost a done deal for July. The fight between Oliveira and Chandler was literally put together Thursday night because the plan was to do Chandler against Justin Gaethje on that card in a non-title fight. So that all changed everything. So people were saying, like, why is Poirier not in the fight? Poirier, he has said in interviews the title can wait. He wants to cash in on his name right now. And the only way to cash in on his name right now is to fight Conor McGregor a third time or to fight Nate Diaz. And you can't make either one of those title fights. Either of those fights mean way more than Dustin Poirier in a title fight. People were saying Poirier, Gaethje should be the title fight. Well, Gaethje is coming off a loss. A lot of those same people who say he should be in the title fight also say that you shouldn't put a fighter coming off a loss into a title fight. Granted, his loss was to Habib, but he still got finished. It wasn't like one of these situations where, it was a 5-round close fight, argument. He got finished and he got dominated. So you kind of got to take him out of the picture. Michael Chandler, he's a big signing for the UFC. I mean, let's look at the facts. They signed him to possibly the second or third biggest contract in the lightweight division. They put him as a backup to the title fight between Habib and Gaethje. They put him on a McGregor card to showcase in a lightweight win. They brought him in, like I've mentioned before, they brought him in specifically to be in big fights and to be in title fights. He's turning 35 in April. There is no need to waste any time putting him in title fights. You have the chance to do it now, do it. So when you put all that together, you get Oliveira and Chandler. I mean, it's not Poirier in the fight, but Poirier has bigger business, and he can fight for the title if he beats Conor again, and if he doesn't, then Conor can fight for the title. And so it's maybe not the fight everybody wants, but it's probably the fight that makes the most sense when you look at the whole scope of everything.
So I won't add much to what you just said, and I agree with all of it. And what I'll also say, though, is so when you're looking at the four guys that legitimately have a claim, and unless you're going to do a tournament, which you're not going to do, you got to pick two of them. So you've got Chandler, Oliveira, Gaethje, and Poirier. For me, they all have similar, they're different, but I would say equal cases at title shots in terms of the sporting value of it. Some people are going to say that Chandler's only had one UFC win. Well, yeah, but he had a bunch of wins in Bellator, and his last win in Bellator was a first round KO over Benson Henderson, former UFC lightweight champion who's only been finished 3 times in his career. And Chandler did it once, and it was just last August. So, which was his second straight first round KO, and he's had 3 straight first round KOs now. So, you know, he deserves a title shot as much as any of the other guys. Oliveira hasn't beat as big a names as some of them. Gaethje is coming off a loss, but it was to, you know, the greatest fighter of all time. Poirier beat Conor, who hasn't had a win in 5 years at lightweight. And he also lost to Khabib. So, you know, they all have their pluses and their minuses. So, you know, to me, it's a wash. You pick any 2 of the 4 against each other, it's just as well. When you talk about business, I say that Oliveira is a cut below the other 3. And Gaethje and Poirier might be a slightly ahead of Chandler if you're only talking about this one fight. Now, here's where it changes. If you have Chandler and Oliveira fighting for the title, to me, that's, you know, it's going to do decent business. It's hard to say how much of a draw Michael Chandler is at this point, but you're not going to know unless you put him in a main event. So that fight needs to be for the title. You can't headline a card with Chandler and Oliveira if it's not for the title. Meanwhile, you mentioned Poirier could fight Conor McGregor in a trilogy, which I'm sure is what they're trying to put together right now. You can put Gaethje against Diaz if you can get him to agree to fight, or you can have Gaethje as a backup for Chandler and Oliveira, or even as a backup for Conor and Poirier, although neither one of those 2 guys is going to pull out of a fight. Gaethje even has a big enough name almost at this point where he could headline on his own. At the very least, he'd headline an ESPN show, or he'd be co-main to a really big pay-per-view fight. Now, the other part of that is, if let's say you can do Gaethje and Diaz and you can do Poirier and Conor, well, now you've got 2 title challengers for whoever wins out of Chandler and Oliveira. So, and those are going to be huge fights. So the UFC's basically set themselves up for the next year or more in terms of big money, lightweight title fights. And to me, like, this was the only decision that made sense. And I don't get some people saying that this makes no sense, because it makes all the sense in the world. And a lot of the other suggestions I've seen don't make a lot of sense. And Poirier Gaethje being right at the top of that list of fights. You know, obviously Poirier McGregor you could make it for the title, but you're just basically saying the title is meaningless. And the other thing is, the biggest problem Daniel Cormier had as champion was people called him a fake champ because he never beat John Jones. And you're going to put the 2 guys that just got beat by Khabib and have them fight for the lightweight title. Right away, you're saying, well, they're a fake champ. I mean, obviously we know that's not true. It's the greatest of all time. He retired, whatever. But now you put 2 guys that have never fought for the title against each other. That's a legitimate champion. And then you can have Justin Gaethje or Dustin Poirier, or both of them, now challenge that guy. And if they beat them, then they're a legitimate champion because they won the belt over a champion. So I think it's a great move by UFC.
Yeah, and here's another key thing when it comes to like trying to do this, where UFC 262, May 15th, is going to be in front of a full arena in Houston, Texas. And, you know, when it comes to selling tickets, you want to know who's from Houston, Texas, or, Charles, you know, whose American home is Houston, Texas, is Charles Oliveira. You know, he's got a little bit of a name down there. So, I mean, you know, it's honestly the best option, because obviously you can't make Poirier McGregor 3 for the title, because you're basically telling the public you want Conor McGregor to be the champion. So, I mean, you know, so it's just, you know, that's, and, you know, and trying to do that off of, you know, him having two straight losses in the division, you know, just, and I'll also not make, you know, I also don't understand some people who will say that Jorge Masvidal shouldn't, you know, they'll go like, Jorge Masvidal has no business being in a title fight, but it's going to draw the best business. And then they turn around and say that that people who are coming off losses should be in a title fight in this division. I mean, it's just, and then the whole other crowd of when Charles Oliveira beat Tony Ferguson, it's like his next fight needs to be for the title, and then they announced Charles Oliveira's next fight is for the title, and be like, oh, maybe he shouldn't actually be in that title fight. Like, make up your damn minds, people. Charles Oliveira deserves to be in a title fight, put him in there. Michael Chandler, he deserves it as much as anybody else. And like I said, he's 35. You want him in title fights. Don't waste your time with him, because they've already been around this. They've already tried the same thing with Eddie Alvarez, and Eddie Alvarez lost his first UFC fight to Donald Cerrone, and they had to take time to build him back up instead of, and he eventually became a champion, but it took a lot longer than they were planning on getting him in a title fight. So just don't waste your time with these people. It's all going to end up working out. You're going to get fights, and when it comes to Dustin Poirier, ultimately, money means more, and more than titles a lot of times, because he's going to make far more money fighting Conor McGregor for a third time, or even if that, if something happens and he ends up fighting Nate Diaz, he's going to make far more money than he would fighting Charles Oliveira for a title.
I go back to, and you kind of touched on it, when when he beat Tony Ferguson, I said, I don't know if you said, I know I said, and a lot of people said, his next fight needs to be for the title. When Chandler beat Dan Hooker, and then he cut that awesome promo and he called out everyone under the sun, including Khabib, I said Chandler's next fight needs to be for the title. I did not say that after Gaethje got beat by Khabib. And when Poirier beat Conor, I said his next fight will probably be against Conor in a trilogy fight, because that's the big money fight, and they both won it. So to me, there's your answer right there. It's that simple. If you want to break it down to that simple, we just gave a whole bunch of reasons why it makes sense, but go back to after each fight, what people thought. And that's, to me, the majority of people that, have a good sense of business and whatnot. And I like to think we do, all said that.
Yeah.
And the two guys that deserved title fights got it, and the two guys that necessarily Poirier definitely deserves one. Gaethje probably doesn't, unless you want to just pretend the Khabib loss never happened, which is dumb. So I think they made the right move. I said it before, I'll say it again.
And when Dana was trying to talk Khabib into fighting again over this last month after the Conor loss, the two guys he was trying to push on him were Chandler and Oliveira. So it's just and ultimately he stuck to his guns.
Two guys he hasn't beat yet.
Yeah, so
that's because you're trying, and then the other one would have been GSP if they had any interest in making that fight, which they clearly didn't.